I want to introduce on my right over here a good friend of mine, Phil Scarborough. Phil lives here in Manio with his wife Sally. They have the Scarborough House Inn over here. We've got Captain Omie Tillett, who this just tickles me to death. He was given the Living Legend Award here on the Outer Banks for this year. There was a lot of great nominees, but it became obvious, with all due respect to all the nominees, that Captain Omie, it's time for him to get his due, what he and his father and his uncle have done for tourism here on the Outer Banks. We talk about boat building, we talk about sport fishing, but when you look at the big spectrum of tourism, I would venture to say, had it not been for what he and his father and his uncle, Toby Tillett, had been doing, might have had a little degree of impact on the way we do things today. And then, of course, John Gaskill. I want to encourage you, if you ever get a chance, if you want to play vacationer, if you want to play tourist, run over to the Body Island Body Island Lighthouse, and you can see this gentleman on Tuesday and Thursday mornings from 9 o'clock, about noon? Not from 9 o'clock to 1. Folks, I've been in there several times with my little tour bus that I do, and you've got Canadians in there, you've got folks from Arizona, you've got Alaskans. I mean, it used to just be when you saw Pennsylvania plates or Ohio plates when I was growing up, you just kind of stared at them. Now, we don't even worry about it. You get plates from everywhere. It's nothing, as you know, to see Utah plates. It's nothing to see plates from Massachusetts and everything. We're really on a national radar here. Whether we realize it or not, we're turning it into a world-class destination here. And to be able to have this gentleman tell the stories tonight that he's been telling over at the Body Island Lighthouse is a real treat to see him talking with people, because whether it's kids or older people, they're just soaking it all in. And the fact that they're actually talking to somebody who is a direct descendant of the many lighthouse keepers that we've had here on the Outer Banks. And we'll have a little question and answer session here when we get toward the end. Time's going to fly here when we get started. But Philip, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you tonight. When we think on the Outer Banks of some of our old line families, the Midgets, the Daniels, the Tilletts, you know, the Gaskills, the Wades, the Rollinsons, the O'Neills, the Austins, we can go on and on and on, the Etheridges, the Wilsons. We really don't hear too much about the Scarboroughs, but we've got a Scarborough here. I just want to start out by saying I went to a family reunion of Scarboroughs up on the Eastern Shore, and I remember reading in the newspaper advertising this Scarborough family reunion. The newspaper article said right there at the first paragraph, it said, the Scarboroughs didn't just come to America on the Mayflower, they owned her. And so that was just too tempting for me. I had to get in there and look around on that a little bit. And it's about 12 years ago, 1997. Email was not that, and websites were not that entrenched in American society like they are today. But I went to the Mayflower Compact website, sent an email with, I've heard that the Scarborough family claimed ownership on both Mayflowers, 1620 and 1624. Don't hold me to those years. We're close in there, the Puritans and the Pilgrims. But I got an email response right back and said that the Scarborough clan that is on the Outer Banks today of North Carolina was actually the leading shipwrights in Devon, England. You could not get anything built in Devon, England area on the western coast there of England unless there was a Scarborough involved. And Phil, I was talking with him the other day about his ancestors. Phil, I believe it was one of your grandfathers, a man named Zion.
Yeah, great-grandfather.
Okay.
Zion Flowers Scarborough.
Oh, right. Was he, when the Union Army came down there, did he go sign up?
Well, Fort Clark. People from the Outer Banks would go down to Fort Clark to get some food. Well, great-grandpa Zion and a fellow named Williams went down together. They were teenagers. They didn't get any food until they signed up in the Union Army. And he served, great-grandpa Zion served 2 years in the Union Army. And they gave him a retirement check until he died in 1915, and his widow drew benefits until she died in 1927. Now, that was 2 years. I call that 2 years well spent.
Quick retirement.
Huh?
short retirement, short service.
Brinkley Gray, you remember Brinkley
Yeah.
Gray? His wife was Elizabeth, and Elizabeth was the daughter of Susan Dunn Lewis, who married my great-grandfather after my great-grandmother Mary Midget died.
Philip, tell us a little bit about your father. I get you grew up there at Thicket Lump in Wanchese. Your father was. Tell me a little bit about your father.
But Thicket Lump was the southernmost. It's Thicket Lump Marina today. My niece owns it, Elena, and my father was born in Avon, and his father Ignatius. My father was Bob. Robert. What was it?
Robert Edward.
Robert
E.
Lee Scarborough. And I'll tell you why he was named Robert E. Lee Scarborough, because his grandfather served in the Union Army, and my grandfather wouldn't get back into good graces. so they named Daddy Robert E. Lee Scarborough. And Grandpa Ignatius had the mail contract in the late 1890s. And the 1899 storm, which was a bad storm, well, that populated Manteo from the Outer Banks. People moved the heck out of there and came to Manteo and Wanchese. So my grandfather had the mail contract, and he moved to Manteo and tied up his boats, what is now Scarborough Creek, down behind the Christmas shop. And, well, I might be stepping a little over, because I'm not sure, but I've heard that he tied up his boat at Scarborough Creek. Now, whether Scarborough Creek was named Scarborough Creek before Grandpa Ignatius Scarborough tied up his mail boats or not, I don't know. So anyway, when his mail contract expired, he went to Wanchese and set up a boat yard at what is now Davis Landing. And his boat yard changed the Hattie Creef. Many of you have heard of the Hattie Creef freighter, a small freight boat with a 45 horsepower engine in it, remember? Omie. And converted her from sail to diesel. And then they fished on the beach and various things. My daddy and my grandfather did. And
Well, he had a lot of skills, didn't he? He not only was he a boat builder, but he also, I know he built one of the hotels, famous hotels over here on the beach.
Carolinian.
Built the Capt.
He built the Fort Raleigh Hotel here in Manteo. The Fort Raleigh Hotel was built with moonshine, East Lake moonshine money. and my daddy just built it. He wasn't a partner he didn't finance it. So let me see. Where was I, Daddy?
We were talking there a little bit about your dad's various skills.
He moved to Washington D.C. during World War I, and he went to night school. And he was actually an architect, but he never got registered because he didn't need it. He could get all the work he wanted. So he built the Carolinian Hotel. He built the Fort Raleigh Hotel here. And most of y'all have seen the old bridge that's falling down at New Inlet. Well, the 1933 storm cut New Inlet. And he built, North Carolina contracted, Department of Transportation contracted Daddy to build that bridge. And by the time it got finished, the inlet had closed in, and when people were coming from up and down the Outer Banks, if they caught low water, they could drive along the ocean. And if it was high water, it was a bad road. The inside road was a bad road back in those days. I remember the first time I remember going down there was 1939 when Daddy had a job doing a radio station for the government.
There in Buxton?
At Buxton.
Okay.
He built that station. And my mother and I went down. We stayed with Daddy's relatives for that week. And on the way back, a preacher caught a ride with us. Well, every time Daddy would get stuck, he'd go cussing. And my mother was a steward in the church once. And she'd say, Bob, please. But we finally made it, and I cannot remember, you in your article, you said no vehicle ever went across it, that bridge. And
I make a lot of mistakes.
This was 1939, and I believe when we took the inside road, we went across that bridge, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Well, you could make good time going down the beach. You know, you're going 40, 45, 50 miles an hour, and then, you know, to just take the lark of driving across that bridge and going slow with no guardrails or anything, there's not much incentive to cross the bridge unless the weather was bad.
With 15-pound air in your tires, riding down that beach, it was like riding on a cloud.
Yeah.
Omie, you don't remember that, do you?
Yes, I do.
Made many trip to Oregon.
I'm older than you are.
I know it.
Well, what Phil reminds me just real quickly of a story. One of the first preachers that ever came down to Hatteras with the right after, I guess, is the forerunner of Duke University, the seminary there. But the gentleman and his wife, they had just gotten married. His name was Leon Russell. This was during the Depression. But they got to the Oregon Inlet Ferry there, and Capt. Omie's uncle, Toby Tillett, was running of course, the ferry. It was the only way to get up and down the island. If you wanted to go to Hatteras, it was Captain Toby. If you wanted to come back, there was Captain Toby too. As it turns out, this young preacher and his wife had spent all their money just trying to get to the Outer Banks from Raleigh. Back in those days, you couldn't cross Alligator River. You had to go all the way up along the underside of the Virginia line to come down. And finally, when you got there to Oregon Inlet, it was only about a quarter. Sometimes Captain Toby didn't charge you. Depending on how much money you had. If you didn't have any, it didn't matter because you had to come back across that inlet. He was going to get his fare out of you sooner or later. But anyway, long story short, this preacher had a devil of a time going down the length of Hatteras Island. It took him 10 hours to get from Oregon Inlet to the village of Buxton. He got a good meal under his belt, and back then the road used to run down the shore side, and you had to be careful about some of the lefts that you would take working your way down toward Hatteras Village. And sure enough, the preacher and his newlywed wife made a left turn where they ended up down there in Frisco Woods, where the Frisco Woods bootlegger had his operations. And there's only one reason why you went down that road. So bless his heart, here came our brand new preacher and his wife. This guy jumped out from behind a tree. His name was Hoover Williams, had a pants held up with a piece of rope and yelled to our new preacher, "How much do you need this evening?" And of course, his wife almost fainted. And but that gentleman, Leon Russell was his name, he told that story. He went on to have a lot of different stations here in the state and was actually pretty high up in the Methodist Church. But for 60 years, he told that story about how the bootlegger of Frisco Woods jumped out to see how much booze he was going to need. Captain Omie, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about boat building, and I brought a picture here. But first, we kind of take for granted today some of the lines we see on our local boats, the flared bows, the broken shear line, some of the work on the sterns and stuff. And I think we as local people had always figured that a lot of this stuff was functional. If you've got a good flared bow there, I mean, it's good for stabilizing the vessel, but also gives you a little bit of working surface up there if you need it. But it turns out there was other ideas for those flared bows that made those boats look good. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Had a feller ask me, he was interviewing me one time, this is good, you'll get a good chuckle out of this. And he was interviewing me, he had a generator he was advertising, and of course he wanted to put something else there too, about Oregon Inlet and boats. And he was asking me the same question, about this flare in the bow of the boat. Well, I didn't know what to tell him, and I sort of put my head down, and boy came up with something. I said, well, it seemed like the men always like something with a lot of shape, like the ladies, and I think that's what attracts them, is all that flare, But anyway, yeah, well, I'm a great one for copying people, you know, and I had the opportunity. You want me going and tell?
Absolutely, yes,
Okay,
sir.
It don't make no difference as long as we're talking. But anyway, well, I'm going to back up a little bit. I heard him talk about this bridge. I had the opportunity to go underneath of that bridge with my dad in an old boat. I couldn't have been over 7 or 8 years old probably, and I was born in 28, but I do remember going underneath of that bridge. And it was a bad storm that cut it out, and I'm not trying to say anything you did. Anyway,
Hurricane 33.
Yeah, it's 33, and my Uncle Toby, he must have had a couple ferries, or anyway, he lost a ferry in that storm, and they never did see a splinter of the boat or the ferry. He lost it in 1933. I just pitch it out, you know, what a storm can do. And but anyway, get back to boats. I think that's where I was. Anyway, I was interested in a boat in the middle 50s and had the opportunity to go down to Florida with a man from Virginia, private man, you know, private boat. Oh, he was a wonderful man. He was just like all of us, down to earth, and he took me under his wing like his son, and him and his wife, and he was interested in building a boat. Of course, I was thinking about it also. Well, it helped me when I was with him. Anyway, we visited all the boat yards and things of that nature, and you see all different boats, and you sort of pick out what you think you like the best, and then you go from there. And we stopped in Palm Beach, Sailfish Center, over there in Lake Worth. But anyway, we had an opportunity to go down to Rivervich's. I called that then the Cadillac at that time, and it was.
Yeah.
And of course, when you see that, well, you might have drools, you know. And boy, if I ever build a boat, I want some of them mines and things like that. So, man, I worked with Mr. Wood. So anyway, we looked at them, and of course, come time I wanted to build a boat, and this was in '60, and I got Mr. O'Neill to build me a boat. And of course, I had a lot of pictures of them boats, and they were beautiful boats. It was a broken shear boat, I would call it, and a tumble home and the frames. That was like a S frame, and then you come on up, flares out. It's a beautiful boat. Of course, you don't see it in many of them today. But it was 4 brothers that did that, and that was the Cadillac at that time. So when I got ready to build my boat and him, we done the best, you know, trying to copy somebody. If you're going to build something, you go look at the best and copy him. He's already done the paperwork and book work.
Yeah, he's made it easy.
And he's smarter than we are, so you go start off with him, you know, and then you look down in Harker's Island area, why them fellas got that beautiful flare. And, of course, these people up here now has got it, too.
Well, absolutely. Captain Omie, you've told me about Warren O'Neill. I mean, he was such a quiet, just a nice guy.
Yes, sir.
And, he's really gets a lot of the credit for a lot of the sport fishing lines you see all over the East Coast. I mean, he was out there on the cutting edge.
Yes.
He was out there. Can you tell us a little bit about what Warren was like? What was his personality like?
Well, he was a gentleman. You couldn't find anybody any better. He would listen, and then he'd pick out what he thought was good too, you know. And of course, my boat was the first boat that he had built. He hadn't built a boat, I don't think, that big. If he did, I didn't know about it. And it weren't but 40 foot long. But he put S frames in it, and I'll tell you, them S frames is hard to put in. But he knew what he was doing. I think he'd been off to the architect, and because he could draw a boat out, you know, knew what he was doing. And he put some flare in it. Didn't put as much as they did today, but you know, you can't ever get. You build a house, you ain't gonna get it like you want it the first time. You know, every time you build one, why, you know, you get better. And that's the way it was. He built mine, and they didn't put quite the flair in it, like I would have liked.
Right.
But sometimes that's harder to do. It's easier to speak in it is to put it in there. But his last boats, he had it in it, and just like you can't build the first boat and get everything just right. But he done a good job. I'm not any.
You learned a lot from him then.
Definitely. And I worked with him, and everybody would think that he's particular. Well, he had something put up there with somebody like me running everywhere a winch, and in a hurry. But he had charter boat captains, and we had a wonderful time, and he was a wonderful man to put up with us, too. So,
Well, you look at the Miss Boo and the Mary One and the Temptation and the Sportsman. I guess, I'd asked you the other day about if there was a favorite boat you had, but you had an interesting point you made to me is every time you build one and you think you've got a good boat, and you do have a good boat, but then you realize there was something different you could do.
Yes. Well, I had built 4 or 5 boats. I can't remember the number. There weren't very many. But anyway, I want to say it was 5. Anyway, I built mine, and then and it weren't what I wanted. And my next one was Temptation, and that was more what I liked. And then I had the opportunity to build a boat for my brother, which he was helping me. And man, I wanted to build him the best, and leave something with him. Well, I think it was one of the prettiest boats I built. But from then on, that was the going boat. That the Brother's Pride, you've seen that down there.
Oh, beautiful. Yep.
Yeah, and she had built, I believe it was 80, and the Mary One, 81.
I've got a picture here, Capt. Omie, I want to show you. And, for those of you who know about the water and everything, when he throws these names out to you, each one of these boats is legendary. But folks, I don't think that tourism, and I said this a little bit earlier, I don't think tourism, not just here in Dare County and on the Outer Banks, but I don't think tourism would have been in this state the way that it is today if it were not for Omie's father. And I've just got a picture here, Omie. I'm gonna, and I'll show this to Chris here in a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's Dykstra's Canal.
Yeah.
And that's the old, what's that? The old Washington Bond Bridge.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Capt. Omie, there's a lot of good water off of Wanchee. Why that it's a quicker trip and you're that much closer to the fish? Why come over in this area to do your sport booking?
Well, it's like everything else. You have to keep your eye on the business. More or less, you can't stay one place all the time. So my dad, we were at Wanchee, so this was the causeway, come from the beach over on the island. And this canal was here where the boats was, a few boats was. It was Stuart Rogers at that time. And then it was Dykstra's, which he got it. Dykstra had it at this time. But anyway, all this didn't happen until after the war. After the war, see. That's when the money started coming around.
Yes.
And anyway, he had that vision, and him, his brother, I'm going to back and forth. Well, my brother had the vision of a ferry. My dad, he was a fisherman, and he got into the charter business. Well, he was down to Wanchees, but you had to hustle the beach and work the hotels, and he did that. And if you work hard to catch fish, well, you get the people. But after the war, he saw we had to move up here. Well, then he had this year little restaurant that my dad and his brother had built before the road went to Oregon Inlet. They knew the road would go there sometime, and that would be the jumping off place because that's where the road turned and come to Manio. So Ray Charles could have seen that it would be in a good place, you know. I won't use that word. But anyway, hey, they saw it. Well, that was in 37, so the war started in 41, and anyway, it hadn't just started.
So they went, your father, he went where the people were.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, I guess the point we're trying to put forth here is we talk about the hospitality and stuff that we have on the Outer Banks, and the Outer Banks is known for the citizens here, the effort we put forth to make sure that everybody has a good time. But here was Sambo Tillett going there where the people were. He could have sat back and said, all right, y'all come to me. If you want to go fishing, come to me. But instead, he went out there and he made things easy for people. The Tillett family has been, no matter what they do, they've been service-oriented. It's about providing a service for people. And here we are, going on 60 years after World War II. The World War II is quickly becoming ancient history. But these guys were out on the cutting edge. And you look at what we were doing here on the Outer Banks, the time it takes you to drive, you can leave right there from Sam and Omie's. And if you go due north, you will have gone through Hampton Roads, you have gone through Richmond, and you're in our nation's capital. If you take that same amount of time and you go due west, you're just barely on the other side of Raleigh. So we've had more in common with points north than we've really had with our own state. Now, fortunately, we've got a 70-mile-an-hour highway running all the way to Raleigh. But these guys were after the guys from up north. It didn't so much matter with the Carolinians. They really weren't our market after World War II. We wanted the Virginians, we wanted the Marylanders, we wanted the Pennsylvanians, and the Ohioans. And Sam Tillett was out trying to get these guys. They're coming down here. We've always been attracting sportsmen. We've got world-class fishing here, as we know. We've got world-class hunting as well. But our markets are points north of us more so than the rest of our state. But, Capt. Omie, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, thank you, I appreciate you looking at that. When do you think that picture was taken?
Well, you see that first boat there, the Kenneth Ward boat?
Yeah.
That was before he put the top on it,
Okay.
Well, that's the way he bought it, and she was bought from Hatteras. And she's one of the best boats at that time. That was a Cadillac.
Beautiful boat. Okay.
Yeah. And he had a Chrysler motor in her, and she done real good, made good time and all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I got to say something while it's on my mind. That don't make no difference.
Okay.
That was the old wooden bridge. And that wooden bridge, it had a draw. You had to crank it open, We're much traffic, big boats, high boats, so they didn't have to crank it open very often. But this is a key, what I'm going to tell you. That draw had just room for one car. And, of course, you say, well, how in the world did that work? Well, whoever got there first had the right-of-way. Well, I'm a local, and, of course, I took my wife to the movie over here, one night, and I was coming back. Well, I was in a hurry. I reckon I had to go fishing the next day or something. But anyway, I was in a hurry. Well, I used that same program, I held it in the middle, and I bluffed that man, and I went on through, and I went through. It was a patrol, and he turned around and come back and stopped me. You remember that? He told me, go on, though. They wouldn't write you a ticket. I knew him, but I believe it was Fields, wasn't it?
Well, then you were lucky.
Yeah, I was lucky. But I bluffed him anyway. If I hadn't said it then, I would have forgot it. You had to laugh a little bit. You go to sleep if you don't laugh once in a while.
Well, Capt. Omie, we'll come back to a little bit of that.
Right. Go ahead.
John, I want to ask you a little bit about, when we go over to Body Island Lighthouse and they see all those pine trees around there and they see all that beautiful green grass, when you were a kid growing up there and your father, Vernon Gaskill, was the lightkeeper there?
Right.
It can't look anything now like it did when you were coming up there.
No, there was no vegetation. When we lived over there, you could see right down to the water from the upstairs windows. I've got a picture from the December 1933 National Geographic, and it shows right out in front of the lighthouse, Alf Drinkwater and Victor Meekins standing there, and the grass was about this high. Now it's a pine grove. And they had all sorts of stories about why we didn't have any vegetation. It was very simple. We had a big herd of cattle over there. And if they'd been feeding on that marsh grass all winter, they were glad to see something green. And when it come up, they'd nip it off. After the war, they took the cattle off the beach, and you see what we have over there now. Lots of vegetation. You also have rattlesnakes.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We didn't have them then. We had cottonmouth, but he don't like salt water, and I was around salt water most of the time anyhow, so I wasn't worried about them. I did kill 2 in the lighthouse yard with all the years that we lived there.
Well, tell me a little bit about some of the livestock that were roaming around there. Whether was your family cattle? Is that what?
Oh, no. People had a cow that would go dry, and they didn't want to feed her all winter, so they just put her on the beach and leave her. And they have calves, and occasionally they'd go over to people would and mark the calves, brand them, or whatever they did to them, usually clip their ear or something other.
Well, if you put them there on the beach, you knew sooner or later if you needed them, you were going to find them. They didn't.
They weren't going anywhere, no.
Yeah. Yep. Well, what else was there any horses when you were a kid coming
no,
up?
I never knew any horses being
Okay.
over there.
Sheep, goats, any other?
Yeah, one time there were sheep over there, because I remember my dog took after one time and made Daddy kind of irritated that he chased the sheep.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your father. I know that your ancestors come out of Ocracoke, and but your dad, we got some pictures here. I'm going to have you take a look at these pictures here in just a minute. But your father, I've heard it said that the lighthouse service was the most efficient bureaucracy that ever existed.
It had to be, because they had a property list, and on that property list was all the things that you rated at that station. If you wanted a new paintbrush, you better have an old one to turn in, and it better be worn out. And if you turned in a lawnmower that didn't work anymore, one of the sailors off the buoy tender would go out there with an axe and break it up. There was no graft. You didn't take them home with you.
You know, when you think about some of the upkeep, it's often been said if you didn't know how to paint, once you went in the Coast Guard or once you went in the lighthouse service, you learned how to paint real quick. Can you tell us some of the stories I guess at one point they actually hired you to paint that lighthouse?
Yeah, during the Depression, well, go back a number of years, when they had 3 keepers at the lighthouse, they had to paint the tower. But in the middle 20s, they transferred one of them out, and 2 men couldn't do it because one man's got to be on the ground. So they sent lighthouse painters down to do the painting. And during the Depression, my father asked to hire local people rather than send lighthouse painters down here, and at least leave that much money in the community. And kind of having the inside track, I got one of the jobs. He was allowed to hire 3 people. And you do it from a box. You haul the box up to the top, and the painters get in the box and paint straight down. And you had both black and white paint in the box with you. You go to the ground, you just shift your falls over, pull it back up, paint down again, till you work all the way around it.
Do you have insurance?
No, but let me tell you, the box, painting from the box, most any kid wouldn't mind that. I was 18 at the time. But we had to get out of the box on a board between the braces up there that holds the balcony up. And there you are, sitting on this board in a round hole, and it would very easily tip with you.
156 feet above the ground?
Right.
Good gracious.
And that was not only scary, it was dangerous. We never even had a lifeline on us. But we got it done.
Where's OSHA when you need them?
Yeah, right, yeah, on the floor then. Yeah, later on when I was with the state ferries, they come and told me that the OSHA man that going to have to put hard hats and these reflective vests on all the crew members on the ship. Said, going to sea is a dangerous business. Well, I didn't tell him I'd been to sea about 23 years in my life. But anyhow, I said, well, I guess we'll have to get them enough of them to put them on the pastures too. Oh, no, he said, pastures don't need them. Well, that's the thinking of some of your government bureaucracy. The pastures went in the same area the crew did, except in the engine room.
Well, John, if you would, I'm going to ask you to stand up. I want to bring, that's modern technology for you. Every time you sneeze or move here, it picks it up. But folks, I know some of you looked at this. I'm going to ask John here to kind of point things out. Chris, have you got that? This is a display that John speaks with there at Body Island. And we talked a little bit about the lack of vegetation. But John, if you would, fellas, if you want to come on here, if you would just talk to us a little bit. I see a little sticker there that says 1933. And I mean, that's soggy bottom there. There is nothing there. I mean, that's all soggy ground.
Yeah. This is in the back, the lighthouse. There's a big freshwater pond back there. And the hunting club that owned the property around the lighthouse dammed up a couple of little creeks and kept it full of water, and they put boxes in those little marsh lumps out there. It was great hunting. So this is on that side of it, between the lighthouse and the beach.
Do you have any mosquitoes out there?
Oh, my goodness. I've been one place in my life, they may have been as bad, but no place has ever been any worse. Sabine, Texas is pretty close, but that was bad. This is my father here. He come to Body Island in 1919, and I come along with the baggage, and I left in 1934. He stayed on until 1940. Coast Guard took over lighthouse service in 1939, transferred all the keepers out the next year. My dad went up North Landing River Station where he stayed until he retired. And this is his dog, Dixie. One of her pups adopted me, and we were really companions. He would go up the tower with me. The only dog I ever knew that would climb that tower, but he would go up with me. And this is how the station looked back in the 30s. And this is the third Body Island lighthouse. There was two before that built south of the inlet. One of them had a bad foundation, and they destroyed it, they abandoned it. And the second one was all right, but the Civil War come along, and when the Confederate troops moved out, they blew it up so the Northern troops couldn't use it for a lookout. This is, I'm telling you about painting the tower. I don't know how much farther you can see here, but this is the box we used. And that little blurb right on the side there is me. I was about as skinny as the fall lines. I weren't very heavy. This would be fastened up here to the upper deck. And we pull the box up to the top, go up the tower, get in the box, and paint straight down. And keep shifting your falls until you work all the way around. The paint was made right on the job. Lighthouse keepers made their own paint.
Well, what'd you anchor? You had a block and tackle up at the top, I assume.
Yeah.
Well, what'd you anchor your line on the ground with? Rocks? You tied it to a car bumper? Or?
No. It would be tied to the box.
I got you. All right.
And we pulled up with the fall lines.
Okay.
And actually, when you would pull it up, you didn't have to worry about it falling back down. You just leave it because the weight of your fall lines would hold it up there. Of course, when you got in, it would, with our weight. And this is my father after he retired. When he went North Landing River Station in 1940, he stayed up there till 1948 when he retired. He had 36 years service.
Do you remember how old your dad was when he retired? Was he in his 70s or?
How old is he? This is my sister. She may know.
He was in his, no later than, he was only 60.
Okay, all right. Just curious. Now
48 and 49. He was 50,
Right.
wasn't
He was in his early 50s when he went to
Well, he was 60 then. 'Cause
Okay.
something like that.
I was just curious. Some people, they didn't have mandatory retirement at 65. There was people working well into their 70s and 80s and stuff. I guess in the lighthouse service, it might have been a little different. You had to climb those steps and stuff.
He retired on disability.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah, but he lived to be 95, so he did pretty good with his.
What do you credit I mean, 95, and you're how old, if you don't mind me asking?
93.
90. What do you credit that longevity to?
I'm not going to tell you what I tell them people.
Oh, come on. We all know each other here.
Some people over there, and they asked me what I laid my longevity to, and I said, well, drinking and cussing, I reckon I've done that. And I don't know how well that went over, but later there was a lady come down writing a cookbook, and a mutual friend wanted her to meet me and talk to me just about the Outer Banks. She asked me the same question, and I told her the same thing that I told the people over at the lighthouse, drinking and cussing. Well, she put it in her cookbook. If you buy the cookbook, you get it.
Yeah, and it puts your name right beside it.
Right, sir. Yeah,
That's how you live. You
perhaps.
live in infamy.
Absolutely. Well, when I grew up, my whole desire in life was to go to sea. From that high on up, I knew what I was going to do. But I graduated from high school in the Depression, and all our merchant fleet was tied up in back channels and places like that. But through the help of one man over in Moncheese, I did get a job on a ship. 17 days after I got out of high school, I was Frank Midget. He had a telegram from the third mate on one of the ships that he'd been on before, and he didn't want to go away from home anymore, so he gave me the telegram, said, you go take this up and give that to the third mate, tell him I want you to have that job. Wow. That was my first ship, proudest boy in the whole world, I'll tell you. Did somebody have a question? Yes, I was. Yes, sir. Well, anyhow, I stayed on that for 10 months, come home, and that was the year I got to paint the tower, and along with a little long net fishing. But I also realized there was no ships then either. So finally, I had to give up, join the Navy to get me a ship, and I went in for 4 years, going to quit. 22 and a half years later, I quit. So that's the way it was.
Well, John, I'm going to move away from this. I want to shift a little gears here. Tell me a little bit about your World War II service on board in the Navy. If I'm not mistaken, I thought you had told me one time that you had some interesting stuff there in the South Pacific.
Yeah. When the war started, I was on a brand new battleship, the Washington. She's identical to the North Carolina. They built two on those blueprints. In fact, we were the North Carolina class, the Washington was. We put her in commission in May the 15th, 1941. And when war come, we were still working her up to battle efficiency. We had a lot to go, but we did that. And then we were sent to join the British Home Fleet to help get those convoys into Russia, because Britain didn't have a battleship that could actually fight the Tirpitz, the German battleship. So what they used us for, we operated right with the British Home Fleet, and we stayed in between the convoys and all the heavy German ships. And the smaller ships went with convoys on in. You may have heard of PQ-17. We were on that one where Admiral Pound told them to scatter the convoy and get out of there. Well, that was a wrong decision, we know now. Very wrong, because out of that convoy of 36 ships, only 11 of them got in. But anyhow, right after that, the Washington was transferred to the Pacific. We landed on Guadalcanal, and things were not going very good out there. So we got out there. Just a few days before we got there, we lost 4 cruisers one night. And in about a month after that, November, we had 14, is that word?
That's right. Just hold that thought there. You said about a month out.
Right. Anyhow, the Japs sent a 14-ship task force down, and we had a bunch of our ships meet them, but they'd done the same thing they'd been doing with all of them out there. Either sunk them or crippled them up to where they couldn't fight anymore. And that left Halsey with the Washington, the South Dakota. They were both battleships, and he found 4 destroyers that had enough fuel to go in with us that night, and we had stopped 14. So weren't very good odds at that, but it got worse. After a few salvos, well, I'd say in 15 minutes of battle, we didn't have a ship left, except the Washington. They were either crippled or sunk. So the Washington took on the 14-ship convoy. We sunk one battleship, a cruiser, and the others decided they didn't want any more of that, so they left, which was unusual for Japanese to do.
Right.
But they did. We chased them off in that battle. Actually, is credited with saving Guadalcanal, because if they'd broke through, there would nothing have stopped them. That battleship was great.
That's an amazing story. Anything ever come of it? Any commendations or anything?
Nope. The story was that they didn't want the Japs to know who we were, and we never got anything for it. Of course, the captain made admiral and went on, and a funny story there. He was a great captain. Everybody loved him. But when he made admiral, promoted to admiral, they sent him in as a battleship division commander. And off the Marshalls, right after we secured Kwajalein, when we invaded the Marshall Islands, we were fueling destroyers, and during the night, the Indiana went across our bow, and we didn't make it. We hit him right number 3 turret. And, well, it made a mess. You can imagine it pushed 64 feet of the Washington right straight back like an accordion. But the admiral on that ship was our former captain. We didn't do it on purpose, of course, but he was a great guy.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry about this. Let's get that thing right in there. Okay.
We had an admiral on there who was loved just as much as Captain Davis. And we had a reunion after the war in Kentucky, where he was from. And we invited any of his relatives to join us. And we learned about Willis Lee, Admiral Willis Lee, when we got there. It seemed like he was a smoker all his life, and they called him Smokey because he was a chain smoker. But he come to school with his Bull Durham bag and a tag hanging out. You folks, many of you will remember that. And the teacher took the tobacco and threw it in the stove. Told him not to bring any more to school with him. So the next day, Willis Lee come with his tobacco and the tag hanging out. Teacher took the bag and threw it in the stove, and it was gunpowder. Blew up the stove. and I don't doubt it. He was, you know, enlisted men don't get around talking to the admiral, but you could talk to him. He'd talk to you. He was a great man.
Phil, that reminds me, you were telling me a story about, it was either your mother or your grandmother, high-strung, good woman, but high-strung, and of course, how many brothers, how many boys was in that family?
4.
4 of you? That poor woman. You kept her...
Endurance.
Endurance. You told me a story, I can't recollect it, but evidently there was over toward Body Island, there was a little practice range there, and you used to have these little dummy bombs. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. You know, just north of Station Landing Bay, up there on the flats of the beach, John.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
They had, out on the flats of the beach, right across from Mill Landing, if you know, most of you familiar. And they had a bunch of, it looked like a bunch of large picnic tables in big circles, right on down to a bullseye. And the bullseye was about a 30 or 40 foot diameter, white. They were all painted white. It was for target, for bombing. The bullseye was a round one. And some of those little smoke bombs didn't go off. And we boys, Pete Poole Daniels and C.C. Duval and myself and a couple more, I can't remember who the others were, went over in my daddy's little boat, chugged across the sound, and walked over the beach to the target. And there were smoke bombs for signal bombs.
Where were the planes out of? Were they here on north end of
Oceana, right north.
Okay,
I think.
all right.
Anyway, they were about that long, cast iron, and had a 10-gauge shotgun shell, powder charge in them, long paper. Remember, Omie? And when they would hit, if they exploded, there'd be a cone-shaped hole where they went into sand, the sand. But if it didn't explode, there was a hole about the size of the arm. So we reached down there, pulled one out. We took all we could tote across the beach into the boat, took them back to Thicket Lump. We were going to, we couldn't get powder back in those days. And we were going to load shotgun shells with it and that black powder and make firecrackers. We were going to do a lot of things with that black powder. So I was beating one out on a cement step, mind you. And I had a pile of powder out about that I couldn't cover. I was 10 years old, so I couldn't cover it with both hands. That's how much black powder. All I had was a pair of short pants on. And that thing went off. And they burned me, scorched my skin, eyebrows, eyelashes, and hair right straight up. And smoke was all over everywhere. So I ran around to the back of the house, and there was a wash tub, number 2 wash tub out there, had some water in it. So I washed, the powder was still hot and burning, so I washed it off my face. And went in the house. Back in those days, I don't know if anybody else ever heard about it or not, but we patted a burn down with flour to soothe it. So I went right in the back door into the kitchen, got a bag of flour, took it out in the back porch, and patted my burns down. And when I went back around in front of the house, the smoke was just clearing out. It hadn't been over 2 minutes since the bomb went off. 2, maybe 3 minutes. And my mother was out on the porch. And the young'uns hollering around, my nephews and nieces running around and squalling and hollering. Everybody was scared. Peephole Daniels was laying out in the yard laughing. C.C. Duval was going. And when I walked around in front of the house, the smoke was just clearing, and my mother was on the front porch looking and said, "Oh, my God, he's dead, and there's his ghost." And she just melted.
She fainted?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
I'll tell you who witnessed it. Suzanne, you remember Wilma? Wilma, my sister-in-law, Wilma, worked ferrets. She was there on the front porch when it happened.
That's hilarious.
Phil, I saw what happened that's what happened to your hair. It didn't come back.
Phil's cutting eyes at Omie over here.
Rogaine.
Well, Capt Omie, Phil, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Well, that was about the end of it, other than C.C. wound up at his mother's house, 2 miles up the road now. He could fram on the front porch, painting. And his mother, Hope, was deaf, but she heard him. She came out and said, "Where you been?" He said, "Down at my mom's." It was just 2 doors down, his grandmother. He wasn't supposed to be any further away than his grandmother's house.
And he'd been over there on the beach with you all that morning, and oh my gosh. Well, is there any stories, Phil, that that's just hilarious there? I guess when you're 9, 10 years old and there's a boat out there, people really weren't, that territorial about their things. I guess if there was a boat there and you wanted to use it, you pretty much helped yourself to things.
Daddy always had a little boat with a little engine in it down there tied up in the creek right in front of the house. One time we were going, me and Vicky Jr., a couple more boys, were going up to Nag's Head and talking about the old bridge where you crank the draw open. we were on the way up there under the draw. We didn't take much gasoline for those little engines, so we'd scrap up pocket change and buy a gallon of gasoline or something, dump the tank, and we'd go. And this Vic Daniels Jr. stuck up an oar and hollered, "Open the draw."
Lord have mercy.
The old man Jack Shannon, he came out there and looked, and he went back in the keeper's quarters in a little shack there. Vicky kept hollering. We kept circling around. Vicky Jr. kept hollering with the oar stuck up. Open the drawer. So Jack Shannon, old man Jack Shannon, came out there with his crank. We took the oar down, went under the bridge. He was throwing a cussing on us. We went under that bridge. Another time I helped Vicky Jr. and Stanley, my nephew Stanley, Bobby's brother,
Right.
rig up a little boat. We put a little engine in it, and Stanley and we were trying it out in Mill Creek. And Willis, Lucy Willis's husband, fellow, he was a retired Coast Guard chief.
Oh, yeah, I know who you mean, yeah.
We ran in through Mill Landing right wide open, and he hollered. Willis, he was either still in the Coast Guard or just retired. He hollered, "I'm going to call the Coast Guard on you, boys." Vicky Jr. said, "That's all right. We got him in here with us."
Well, Captain Omie, tell us, I've always marveled at Toby Tillett and stuff. We've got, fortunately, over at the Outer Banks History Center right near here, we've got a lot of pictures of him, but what's your recollections of him? Can you tell us a little bit about Toby Tillett?
Well, he was my dad's brother, older than my dad, and of course through that, why, he made a lot of me when I came along, and he wasn't married at that time, so I was his eyeball, And my dad would always take me down there to when my dad was running parties out of the inmate, why many times he'd drop me by and put me off on the ferry, and I'd go on up to the camp and spend the rest of the day with my Uncle Toby, and well, he just made a lot of me, and I made a lot of him too, And I believe it must have been that 33 storm, because he was running a ferry out of One Cheese here. You remember? You don't remember that?
33.
Yeah. You remember
That's
the
when I was
storm?
born.
Huh?
I was born in 33.
Oh,
I was 3 months
well,
old when
you
the
are
33.
young, aren't you?
Yeah.
Lord
I was
have
3 months
mercy.
Phil-
old when
Phil's
that
the baby
33
of this
storm
group.
came
Huh?
by.
You remember it, huh? You remember it when Toby had his ferry down at One Cheese Wharf? It was after that 33 storm, because he was carrying.
33, I was gone. I wasn't
Well,
here.
yeah, I reckon it's left
I'd
up
left
to
at
me. It
home.
don't make no difference. That's where he was. But anyway, my story is he made a lot of me. And at that time, well, I would go with him, and he'd, on the old ferry, man, I like that. I'd go down through the engine room and talk to the engineer looking at old big motor, old Fairbanks. I don't know, 3-4 cylinder, and that thing chug going down. But my story is, I'd always, the steering rope and had a big cog, I reckon you would call it, and the rope would go around it, Sonny, and it pulled the rudder. And that was the steering wheel, and I could sit up on that thing, man, I could see over the windows in. And you know what? I enjoyed it, the wind blowing through there. And you know what? When you turn it real hard, that rope builds up and it slips. And I was sitting on that thing pinched me. I never forgot it either, I'll tell you. But I remember that. But he was always, and even that trip or another one, why, he'd always give me a nickel, most times something like that. He was just like a dad. And when they anchored off there at Ocracoke, he had another little ferry that he would take the cars in, because the other one was big enough he couldn't. It was too shallow. And I dropped my money. I was looking at it, in and out my pocket, and I dropped that thing overboard. Lost my money. But that'll stick with you too. But I'll tell you something else sticks with me. When I go with him down at Organimic, and this old ferry, you have to change gears. You have to use bells, You pull it maybe one time, put her out of gear, and then maybe you do it again. she put her in reverse, and in reverse, maybe you give her two, and she goes forward and one out of gear. I don't know. But I had been with him enough, I knew the bells. And this particular day, he says, Omie, you put her in there. And of course, I put her right in there. But he was standing there if something happened. But I thought I'd done something, you know.
Well, there's a lot of energy runs through Oregon Inlet. I mean,
Yes, sir.
How that thing could handle a sea? I mean, when you look at the pictures of her and everything, but I guess she was real good in the water. I mean,
Well, if tide's running, well, that was all up inside. And of course, on each side the current would be running along the shore, but you'd always have a lot of pine net stakes stuck down. You know, he'd just go up there and pull right around on it and then just kick her around, or better, just bump it, and use them pine net stakes. And I was always wondering, you know, little boy, why don't he use bigger ones? But that weren't the case. You do the math. When you got a whole lot of small ones, they give over more. See, they bend, that old barge fall up against it. Mm-hmm. But if you had a big one, it wouldn't bend, it'd break off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he knew. He used them pine net stakes. He probably put about a dozen together. But and then he put her bow up like a landing barge and lowered the ramp, and cars would go off and go down the beach. And he knew everybody, man. He was a wonderful man. He, when he picked people up on the south side, so he always lived on the north side. That's where the camp was. He stayed there in the daytime, come home at night. But when he leave the south side, he'd look out the back and see if it's any cars, you know, just drove up. And if they did, he'd turn around and go back and pick them up, go right on. But it was different. You couldn't do that today, you know. Too much traffic. But
yeah.
He was full of a lot of down there in the bank.
Oh, absolutely. They loved him in Hatters.
Yes, sir.
That man was a hero, was an Outer Banks hero.
Yes, sir.
Quiet, unassuming. You could hardly hear him.
Yes, sir.
Over the wind.
Yes, sir. And anyway, you know, family and probably a lot of other people think, you know, they should name the bridge after him, but I can see the man it was named after, that was the way they'd done it, and he was probably responsible of getting the bridge, but it would have been nice if they'd had a ferry named after him.
That'd be a great name for a ferry,
I'd
Toby
like to see
Tillett.
that done.
Yeah.
And
well, maybe we will. You never know.
Yeah. But he did a lot. I never known of him missing a trip. That's something.
Yeah. And, you know, there was people, there might have been a medical emergency, and weather being what it was, and, you know, probably put his life on the line.
Yes, sir.
A couple of times. Oregon Inlet, as you well know,
yes, sir.
A dangerous place.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen him go down there in hurricanes. When you say hurricane, you can't get down there in a hurricane. I had that happen to me one time. I had some boats down there. It was in November. And we caught some king mackerel there. Buddy Davis was running one of my boats, Sonny. You remember? You don't remember that? He was running sport fisher. Yeah, and Sam and Jerry Jr. and I had my boat. I don't know which was. Well, it might have been Warren's boat. I didn't have her over there. I had mine in Mans Harbor rock fishing. But anyway, they had them down there catching king mackerel. And we had a shift of wind or a bad night that night. The wind come out of south probably and blew about 50 or whatever. And Uncle Chester, he called me up that morning about 6 o'clock. He said, you better come down there, tide is raising. Well, we went down there and tide was all over the docks in. And, we tried to get the boats out. And anyway, tide was on the docks because we could not get down there. We couldn't go no further than the lighthouse. We had to leave her and wade down there.
Wow.
And I got in at sport fisher. And that, something wrong with her governor. I finally found out what was wrong. The man had the boat before I had it. It had a 653 in it. Some of you mechanics here would know what I'm going to talk about. And that Detroit has a restricting fitting in the return line. And that holds the pressure to the pump and the injectors. And when you slow her down without that, why, you get in hold no pressure to her, she'd die right out. You couldn't make her idle. But when I got rid of her, I was told what it was. And I weren't used to her. And when I got in her, why, she had stretched all the lines back, and the stern had beat on the docks. And when I pulled her up, it had wore the plank almost in two, you know. But, man, that was a blowing. That was a bad time. Even had to cut the lines to get out. But anyway, when I started out, I couldn't make the turn. The wind was blowing right down the creek. And, man, when I changed gears, she stopped on me. And she drifted right on up there to the fuel dock. And Pivans was up in the flare of her. Man, they were chewing her. And broke her around the Pivans. I was in bad time, Sonny. I'm telling you, it's bad. Worse than that, tell you. But anyway, when I got her turned around, I got her coming out. And when I come out the Orcanelli channel, and where you turn to go to one, she rolled so much she was getting air.
Wow.
Getting air, right? 'Cause, well, she would bail her out of exhaust. You ain't never seen that, had you, Sonny? Yes, sir. She rolled up far enough that she would catch air in the suction. That was side the pump was on, and you hear her beller out exhaust. And you know what? Things go through your mind. You know, you got to run her if something happens. So I didn't have to go maybe a half a mile before I get behind some sand lots. And as she'd lost her water, my intention, I was going to run her up on the shoulder, you know. But you had to have something to think about and do. So, man goes through a lot of things, don't he?
Well, that would have probably saved you. You never know what happened in a storm like that. You have to run her up on there.
That's just how he can get down to fishing center, Dorgan Inlet. And of course, in a bad time, that's the worst wind you can have, is right up that creek. And when you get a storm, tide gets high, you can't get down there. If you get down there, you can't do nothing. You just can't do it.
When Oregon Inlet Fishing Center, when did that come about? Was it about the time they opened the bridge? Is that when Oregon Inlet Fishing Center there to Oregon Inlet really took off? Were they simultaneous, bridge and the fishing center? Was the fishing center there while Toby was still running his ferry?
Let's see, the road had to go down there first.
All right.
The road went there, and then the fishing center was built, and that was built by Lawyer Worth. Park Service was taking the property at that time, or getting the property. And when they got it, why then I believe Lawyer Worth might have built the fishing center, and then when the park got it, why then Uncle Toby, he got the franchise.
Okay. Well, I remember talking, I guess it was Arvin or some of these fellows, but, you know, when that, 1963, when that bridge was opened, you know, we talk about all the erosion that we have here, and there's a lot, don't get me wrong, I'm all for the environment, we all are and everything, but they talk about all the, you know, the loss of land we're looking, but it's my understanding when that bridge was built, you only had to go about 5 or 6 pylons out, and you were running out the inlet.
Yes, sir. But I want to tell you, too, about a storm, Ash Wednesday storm. Yeah, that was about the best storm we ever had here on the beach. And that's when they were building the bridge and the rise, you know, going up
Absolutely,
on the bridge.
almost 80 feet.
And it was in March, wasn't it? March 7th.
Okay.
How about that?
Yeah, they were building a bridge. Yep.
I was in Florida at that time. My wife,
Well, there was another storm following October.
yeah, but
That
that
opened
one,
that
that's
inlet
the one
south
I'm
of
leading
Avon
up to.
again. It was opened second time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got pictures
Yeah,
of
so
that.
it's March of '62, the Ash
Yeah.
Wednesday storm.
Anyway, they were fixing that rise, you know, going up on the bridge. They had drag lines all there, you know, for different stuff. And that Ash Wednesday storm come through there. The fishing center had been moved. I think Uncle Toby might have done that from down on the end up into the head of it. And the sea tide came through there so rapidly that it undermined a drag line, and all you could see was about half of the boom sticking up. You might have seen pictures of it. I got to talk with my hands. I can't help it. I got, but anyway, that was something, wasn't it? And the fishing center was gone. It wasn't a pile in there. The thing was, well, down the
Wiped out.
sound or whatever. I mean, it can get bad. And every dock was gone, and it was one boat in there, the Butch, Balfour Bombs.
Okay.
Yeah, and she was there, survived it, but I don't know how she done it.
Well, Omie, you know, when you got out of school and went straight to work, you know, I know you and Patsy raised a family and everything, but you were gone before daylight, and oftentimes the sun had set before you got home.
Yes, sir.
What has she meant to you?
Well, it takes a special woman to be a fisherman's wife. And all I can say, God knew what he was doing when he made a woman. He don't make no mistakes. He knew what a man needed, didn't he? So I know I got a good one. Put up with me and raised a family and gone all the time. Seems like when you're on the water, it takes you all the time, doesn't it, Sonny? I mean, it ain't much time for home, you know. You get up before daylight, get home at dark. You don't have new motors. You have to get going for the next day, have people booked. It's what a push. Or maybe you got a friend that needs help. You got to help him, you know. And it's a season. It's just, it's a hard life. Got to enjoy it. You know, I like that word, enjoy, excited. You know, excited is a good word. I didn't ever use it any. But here for the past few years, it has been really rich in me. And I can think back. What helped me in my fishing, I had mates that was excited in their work.
They had a passion, didn't they?
That's right. And they would work hard, always on the job, dependable, polite to people, and had everything to help you, you know. You know, when you're up top, why, you got to have a man, well, can think like you think and be on the job. And, well, he's got to be excited in his work.
Right, and pay attention to the needs of the people. It's
Yes,
about
sir.
the people
Yes,
on
sir.
that boat.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
you're doing your job, he's doing
Yes,
his
sir.
job, but at the same time, when they step off of that boat, they better to have a
Yes, sir. And it means the same thing in a captain. Captain, you get a man that's excited in his work, captain. He's there ahead of time rather than the party sitting on the boat waiting for him and things of that nature. It's any kind of work, if you're excited in it, why, you do a better job, you know. And you know what? I set you up. Now I say that's the way we have to be in Jesus, need to be excited.
Well,
If
Omie, let
we're
me ask you
excited in him, we will be better workers for him most of the time.
Omie, let me ask you about that. I know your faith is very important to you.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. The blessing of the fleet, that's something that you started
Yes,
here. I
sir.
didn't mean to interrupt you, but
I'm glad you did.
you know, I've got a friend I grew up with in Hatters who fishes in the Caribbean, and they have a blessing of the fleet. I don't know what island he's on down there, but he said you can thank Omie Tillett for that. And so evidently that's a tradition that is spread, you know, to ports and marinas all up and down the East Coast. But it's essentially something you just said, all right, fellas, we're going to have a prayer this morning. Join with me.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know how I got started. Somebody had to ask me. You know, you don't just jump right up and say we're going to have a prayer. I would now, but back there then I wouldn't, you know. So I feel like somebody might have said maybe somebody was sick, pray for them or something of that nature. And always somebody push you out of the nest, you know.
That's right.
And
That's life.
I had to be pushed at that time. But you know, I'm glad they did. And I was home 2, 3 years ago, always seemed to me like I dreaded to do it. Maybe you all are not like that, you know, call on you. And the Lord spoke to me and on this, and it made a difference too, and it would make a difference in anybody else. It's good. You know, you've always heard it's an honor and a privilege when God calls on you to give a prayer. I mean, Christian, you've always heard that in the church. And I had heard that, and then he added a little bit more to that, which is the key to it. And he said, Omie, it's an honor and a privilege, but the privilege comes when somebody asks you to give the prayer and give you the privilege to talk to me. And that's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And I call that's the highest calling it is. Do the math.
Homie,
Huh?
thank you. That's rich.
Isn't
That's
it rich?
beautiful. Yep.
It is. And he give it to me, share. But when he gives you something, you're supposed to share it. If you don't share it, he ain't going to give you no more. I ain't going to say not. But he wants you to share it. And the more you share it, the more he'll give you. And I'll tell you what, he has given me some recently. And I'm going to share it.
Well, you told me, I mean, the churches over there in Wanchese, whether it's Wanchese Assembly or Bethany there, I mean, there's some of the, every time I've ever been in those churches, they treat you like they've known you your whole life. They'll ask you later what your name is if they don't recognize you right out of the gate. But you told me, I got a kick out of this the other day, there was a good service going on at church there, and you usually carry a handkerchief or something in case you got to dab your eyes or whatever.
I might be, I think I know what you're leading up to. Okay. Anyway, I got saved. When I got saved, it was 1969. And it was the last Sunday in February. It was the Women's Missionary Day. And I got saved that day. And I was born in March the 9th. So there's a couple weeks apart, a week and a half. In our little church, they always recognize birthdays every week. And if anybody's had a birthday, well, they get up there and sing happy birthday, and they maybe give them $1 for missionary offering, you know. And that's the way we raise money and all. And well, it seemed to me like I wanted to be recognized for my spiritual birthday. So that would put them together, you know. 2, 3 years ago, I said, I'm going to go up there this morning and be recognized for both of them. It was kind of cold, you know. And I went up there and I said, I want to testify. And they give me the mic, and I kept thanking the Lord for saving me. And anyway, and I got crying, and then next thing I know, my nose, it started dripping water. If anybody's old, you know how it is, old people, cold weather, and get crying, well, it makes it drip. And it was raining out my nose, and I rubbed my hand in my pocket. Always I carry a napkin in there. I think I even got one now. But anyway, I wiped my nose, you know, and I opened my eyes. I had a $5 bill there just wiping my nose. You like that one? But it's true.
Yeah, well, you told me that.
Had to tell you
You
that.
told me I was wiping my nose, and that thing kept jabbing me. I said, this napkin's about to kill me. And there was a $5 bill.
$5 bill.
Oh, boy.
But I get my point across with it, and everybody
Yes.
get a chuckle.
John, you know, you moved away for a while. I mean, it's been recently, and we thank goodness we're glad to have you back on the Outer Banks. We're thankful for all the ambassadorial duties, I guess, that you do over there. But you went down to Gulfport, I guess it's a maritime mariner's home.
Naval retirement home.
Okay, all right. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience there? If you went down there to retire, how'd you end up home again?
Oh, yeah, that was very easy. Hurricane Katrina took care of that. Very easy. No, after my wife died in 1993, I hung around here until 2001, and I knew the home was there. So I made application and went down, and it was real nice. They take care of you real good, and hopefully I'll get back down there when they build the new one. But anyway, I was up here when Hurricane Katrina come through, but it destroyed the whole ground floor, and that's where all the services were. It was really a city within a building is what it was, real nice. So hopefully one day I'll get back down there.
So you were here just visiting, seeing
Yep.
family and stuff,
Doing
and
same.
then didn't even have a home to go back to.
Yeah, I had the old place in Wangees. It's, I guess my dad bought the house in 1920. And when the Laura Barnes schooner come ashore, he got enough lumber out of her to frame in the back, put 3 rooms on the back, and I'm still living in the same house.
How about that? 200 years after Blackbeard, and piracy's alive and well on the
Yeah.
Outer Banks.
Yep.
They did
There was a fella come down here, Duffus. You know Duffus, don't you?
right.
He was writing a book on shipwrecks on the Outer Banks, and he couldn't find out anything about the Laura Barnes, the schooner that my house is built from. So somebody told him to go see Daddy, and he did. He was standing in the living room and asked my dad if he knew anything about the Laura Barnes, and he said, well, to start with, you're standing on her.
Yeah, that Kevin Duffus, he did. He told me, he said, I was talking with Gaskill up there. He couldn't remember his name, but the way he put it was, he said, well, what can you tell me about the Laura Barnes? And the fella leaned over there and said, you're sitting in her.
Yeah.
And there's some great stories there.
Yeah, I was 5 years old when she come ashore, and she was a wreck. And all them old wooden ships were when they hit the beach, they'd crack and bust up.
Go to pieces.
Yeah. My mother's first sewing machine come out of a ship that come ashore there, carrying supplies to Belgium after World War I, all relief supplies. So when they offloaded cargo, they did get that ship off. She was a steel ship. When they offloaded cargo and they sold it, my mother got her sewing machine, the old treadle type Singer.
Absolutely. That's the Scarborough family down on Hatteras. I know Phil's got a lot of his roots down there, but I mean, they were tremendous wreckers. I had a fella tell me the other day, when these ships came ashore, it was like having a Walmart wash up. And folks, is that descriptive or what? You know, money, furniture, clothes, paper, things we take for granted, chocolate, rum, molasses, sugar cane, you name it. And I mean, we all know where the name Nag's Head comes from. There's a lot of people dispute that, but you know, I can imagine very well. It seems to me that's not too far-fetched. Our inner pirate manifesting itself, run that horse along that sand dune with that lantern around his neck, ship offshore, think there's better passage to the inside. She strike on the bar here, work her way inside, and run down there and clean them out. Somebody's got to get all that stuff.
We had a banana ship come ashore once. Of course, bananas are shipped green, and that's how we got them. We eat green bananas, half-ripe bananas, and right on down to where we had to throw them out.
Yeah, there's a lady in Hatteras said bananas. She said there for 2 years I didn't never see another banana.
don't
We have
think
bananas
anybody
for
did.
breakfast. We have bananas for lunch. We have banana cake. We have banana bread. We have banana cereal. We have banana and cow. The banana wreck. Folks, I told you an hour and a half was going to go by very quickly. I mean, we just sat down here. I think we've got the room mic'd. David and Chris have done a fantastic job, but, you know, does anybody have any stories or any questions for these gentlemen? I've recognized a lot of the people in here. Got a question for these fellows? Anybody, just shout it out. Yes, ma'am.
I want to know if any of you all who were down here in the the storm were aware that the storm was coming.
Were you aware that the Ash Wednesday storm was coming? Anybody? Omie? Phil?
Here. I was here.
Okay.
I was in Norfolk. I was stationed in Norfolk Coast Guard at the time. But the Chesapeake lightship drug anchor all the way to Sandbridge. She was just about ready to go on the beach. When the
Big old mushroom anchor, that
big
takes
old
something.
mushroom anchor.
Yeah.
Sidney Toller was on it.
Well, you knew something was coming then.
Just get off.
Yeah.
I was in Palm Beach and it was rough air.
Didn't know it was coming. One was Nellie Merville, and the other was Frank Dinwiddie.
Boy, that's a lot of damage, and Phil did hit down there in Hatteras. I mean, you've seen David Stick's book and stuff, but you know, it's just a phenomenal flood tide, absolutely. And you know, folks, it could happen again. Granted, that was going on 50 years ago, but you never know. You never know what's going to happen again. We've been lucky. Hurricane, I better just hush up here. Let's just let you go there. All right, any more? Yes, ma'am.
Omie, could you give us a little history on Sam and Omie's?
Yeah, been putting out, didn't she? Yeah, him and Uncle Toby did that in 37. See, they had a vision, you know. Like I say, I can look back at my family and not only them, but they had visions, you know, down the road that this was going to happen, be a good turnoff. You know, the road would be going on down the beach, a good place to start a business. And my dad and his brother Toby had a ferry. I don't think my pop had much money back there then. That was a poor time, but I think my Uncle Toby was the one that done all the furnishing money, but they worked it out, I'm sure. And then the war came on, and in 41. See, before then, why, Jeanette's Pier got going. I can remember when that was built. That could have been built in 35 or so, or maybe by the time that was built. I'm not for sure. But anyway, they'd used it for a little restaurant, sandwiches and things like that. Never did make no money. And then the war came on, and weren't many tourists, no tourists. I'll tell you something else. I'll jump right on while I think about it. We had to paint our headlights, and I don't believe it was a hold like, say, 2 or 3 inches, maybe an inch or so high.
Size of a quarter, maybe?
Yeah. It's just real small if you drove up and down the road, but it weren't much traffic. It was Army trucks and things like that. But anyway, I'll get back. I forget. See, I'm an old man. I have trouble remembering, so I got to say it when I think about it. But during the war, why then they used it for a beer joint, and of course they did that until after the war. And then that's when my dad moved there, and we moved our boats up at the bridge, and he called it Sam and Omie's Fishing Center, and that's when Gulfstream fishing started. There wasn't any Gulfstream fishing at all here before then. So everything started after the war. And even when we went to the bridge, I was thinking about that. That canal there wasn't wide enough for 2 boats to pass. So we had to take a shovel, because we're way up on the west end. We had to take a shovel and shovel the turf off to be able to pass by another boat, get out. But anyway, this is kind of funny too. But Dad, he's a good cook, but he's always fished. And anyway, he stopped fishing and ran that. And anyway, he'd bring the gas over to the boats he had a couple barrels in the back of the truck, and he was siphoning the boats, and he called it Sam and Omie's Fishing Center. So we were Gulfstream fishing, and the people were just coming in there, man. And when he'd open the door, why, they'd fill up. Why, at first they wanted some of their eggs turned over white and all of this. Boy, he done the math quick. He says you get them scrambled or else you don't get any at all. That's about when the people started scrambling them. But anyway, that's why he done the math.
I bet he had somebody said, this is not what I ordered. I bet he had something to say.
He handed it to him. But anyway, he did it for 2-3 years or so, and or maybe longer than that. And then he sold it to a fellow from the city, Tom McKinney, and kept the same name, and it's still keeping the same name. And
Absolutely, it's a landmark.
But that
I mean,
was
how
when-
else do you?
that's when the fishing got going. And I'll tell you what, there was a lot of fish out there too. I'll tell you, they were hungry. But you go out there now, it's a lot of changes, and it makes you think that they're caught up, and it's just not as many. I say they're easier to catch there then. We caught all the dumb ones. It was easy. I quit at the right time. Hey, I'll tell you what.
Got out when the getting out
I'll
was
tell you
good.
what, I'm not going out there no more either. I got one of my mates back there, boy, he kept a count of how many dolphin we caught. He was excited in it. It was a lot, wasn't it?
Wow.
You know how we took them off? We put them between our legs. We didn't know how to take them off, and they're like a little bull down there jumping around. Man, you couldn't hold on them. Oh, man, it was something, wasn't it, Sonny? Huh? Yes, sir. And we went out, we rented some white uniforms, man. I don't know how they ever got that blood out of them. Pure white. You know something?
I tell you, it was.
You didn't have to wash them, see? I'm looking out for you.
Miss Linda?
I have a question, Amy. Patsy and I were talking about this right before we came in. One Christmas, and it was either December of '64, because Arvin and I were married in '64, or it was Christmas of '65. We went over to Patsy and Amy's, and we used to eat with them an awful lot. And when we got there, about, I'm going to say no later than 8:30 Christmas morning, Amy is sitting in the middle of the living room floor. He had been up all night long trying to put together a Barbie dollhouse pajama. He still had not gotten all of it together, and when we were eating breakfast, he looked at me, and he was a little agitated. And he looked at me and he said, Linda, if you and Porky ever have a daughter, don't ever buy her a Barbie doll. Well, Arvin went through that with Allison, and about probably 7 or 8 years ago, at 4 o'clock one morning, I almost picked the telephone up to call Amy and say, Amy, I've got a Barbie dollhouse that I can't put together for Caroline. But I didn't do it.
Well,
I don't think.
Do you remember that Barbie dollhouse?
no, see me, like I always try everything. I think I can do it, and then later I say I'm not as good as I think I am.
Well, you were awfully good and you were awfully patient.
I was.
But you finally did get that last piece on that dollhouse before we left back to work.
Most times they're so simple, I just miss it somehow or another.
Folks, it's going to be 11 o'clock before we know it. We got a couple more questions. Anybody? Okay. All right. Yes, ma'am.
What was life like while you all three of you were kids when you were growing up?
John, you want? She said, "What was life like when y'all three were kids?" If you don't mind, I'm gonna let John talk a little bit about it. Just how did you keep things cold over there at Body Island? I mean, you had no
Oh, you
refrigerator.
did. We didn't have any refrigeration, but we didn't have any over here either. There was no commercial power. And even when they electrified Body Island Light, they had to put 2 generators in the base of it to provide the electricity. I don't think we got electricity till after World War II, did we? Commercial power?
For Wanchese?
Yeah.
Had it
Or over on the-
Right at 1940.
Was it? Yeah.
That's when it went thick at lump, but it was running onesies in the 30s.
Yeah.
We had to run a few houses anyway. Well, there wasn't but a few houses.
Well,
I was 9 years old.
We had a light
I'm
plant.
42, during
Okay.
World War II. I was 9 years old before we got electricity at Thicket Lump. But that was the last house on the end.
Well, can any of you fellows remember how your mothers or your grandmothers kept things cold? What fish, how'd you keep, what'd you have to do, salt it?
Salt, yeah.
What do you-
We always had
Iceman.
crops of fish.
Iceman brought a chunk of ice about once
Yeah,
or twice a
but
week.
You didn't have no ice plant. I don't know the year. Ed Ward, he built one down at,
Yeah, onesies war.
yeah, but I don't remember the year it was.
You'd always go down to the wharf and get a piece of ice that they had for icing the
Yeah, but
fish.
how about before him?
Well, they've always had icy fish that they
Yeah,
caught.
they probably got it from Lip City.
Yeah, he did come in by Lip City.
Yeah. Freight boat.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd ship fish out and bring ice back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anything that anything that sticks out in your mind about growing up,
Going to school.
yeah, what about going to school?
Go together or on school?
Hey, when I was going to school, I was thinking about getting out of there and going fishing. I'll tell you.
Some things never change.
But
We didn't care a lot about school.
But you know what? I'd like to leave something with the kids. I have, I'm a great one for thinking like everyone else, why this and why that, what would be good or that. But if you don't pay attention to the teacher, that teacher is a hard worker. And I admire them now, put up with kids. But my point is, every word that she says is important. And if you don't focus on it and you don't take it in, you're playing and you don't get that key words for them lessons, you're not going to get them lessons up. And then you go to the class, you haven't got them. When you get behind, you lose your interest and you don't catch up. Pay attention to the teacher. Every word comes out of her mouth is important, like your wife. I say yes, ma'am.
Omie, you told me one time you had an argument with Patsy.
Oh man, hey, but we'd be. Let's see. I believe it's 8th of June. We'd be married 60 years.
Good
Did I
gracious.
get it right?
You got a thumbs up.
Anyway,
Hey.
anyway, wait a minute. You got to hear the rest of it. The key, man. We've had such a wonderful marriage. We've never had but one argument, and I'll tell you what, it's still going. I might got one. See, you got to tell it.
All right. Any more questions? Let's get ready to go home.
I've enjoyed it, folks.
Capt Omie, thanks for Phil, Capt Omie Tillett, John Gaskill, thanks for all you've done.
Thanks.
I know y'all have been reading in the paper here, but Capt Omie got what's the Longleaf Pine Award? Folks, there's been 3 of those given in our part of the state. That is no small thing. And when I said this early on, I meant it. I think the degree of success that we enjoy here with tourism, if there hadn't been the Omies, if there hadn't been the Sams, if there hadn't been the Toby Tilletts, and a whole lot of others, we've been leading the way. We've been leading the way for tourism in the state. And Dare County is a world-class, the Outer Banks is a world-class resort today because of people like, in large measure, these 3 people right here. I want you one Tuesday or one Thursday to come over about 9 o'clock in the morning and hear this man hold court with a bunch of Canadians or a bunch of people from Detroit and places like that. They eat it all up. We take it for granted, but when he talks to these people, they're all ears. Children are it's really something to see. Thank you, folks.
I want to say one thing. They picked me as a legend, longleaf pine, all that, and I couldn't have done it without Jesus. I just want to give him the credit. And I thank him for it. That's it.
Thank you, Omie.